Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Monifa Brathwaite. I am the Public Information Officer for the Virgin Islands Port Authority. I'd like to thank those of you here with us here tonight on behalf of our Port Authority's Board of Governors and our Executive Director, Mr. Carlton Dell, for joining us here today in person, and also those viewing remotely. You all have the after-post festival carnival glow, and I appreciate you taking your time to come here tonight to join the Port Authority and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who is here tonight with us to discuss the Christiansted Harbor Schooner Bay Channel project. Now, before I turn the mic over to the Port Authority's Director of Engineering, Mr. Preston Beyer, I'd like to recognize some key staff members here today with the Port Authority. We have our Assistant Executive Director, Mr. Bill Rollins, please stand. We have Kate Davis, the young lady in the back who's been greeting you all. She is our Procurement and Contracts Manager. She deals with all of our projects. We also have our engineers here. We have Mr. Mojanaya Dennis. Can you please stand? We have Tafari Nelson joining us soon. He's also one of our engineers. And the guy in the green is our IT tech here tonight, Mr. Mario Pinder. With that being said, I think I'd like to recognize our Assistant Tourism Commissioner, Mrs. Elizabeth Hansen Watley. Thank you for coming and joining us here tonight. Oh, Catherine Hendry, our attorney. I'm in trouble. I forgot to mention the Port Authority's legal counsel. I'm sorry. Blame it on my head, not my heart. Mr. Preston Beyer, our Director of Engineering, will now speak to you a little bit more about the project and introduce the Army Corps of Engineers.
Thank you, Monifa. Good evening, everyone. My name is Preston Beyer. I'm the Director of Engineering with the Virgin Islands Port Authority. I'd just like to echo Monifa's statements in thanking you all for being here this evening. And as she mentioned earlier, we're here to talk about the Christiansted Harbor Navigation Project. This project has been a topic of discussion within the Virgin Islands and within the St. Croix community for quite some time. The Virgin Islands Port Authority has requested federal assistance through the United States Army Corps of Engineers to assess the most practicable alternatives to improving navigation in Christiansted Harbor so that we can facilitate mini cruise ship vessels calling on Christiansted. I'm joined behind me with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers team. They're going to be walking you through a presentation to talk about their process in determining the feasibility of these projects, as well as then taking questions from the audience here, and then we'll be going through any further questions you may have following the presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Chris McNeese, the Project Delivery Team Project Manager with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Jacksonville District.
Thank you, Preston. Again, folks, my name is Chris McNeese. I am the project manager with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Jacksonville District specifically. With me today is our project delivery team, some of our leads. We have various leads on our project delivery team, and they help coordinate the various nuances, as maybe it's environmental, maybe it's economics, maybe it's engineering. I appreciate the summary that Preston just provided you all. Just to kind of take the elephant out of the room, the Corps is not here to speak to you about dredging Schooner Channel. We are here to listen to the VI Port Authority's problems as it relates to our federal navigation project that a lot of folks commonly refer to as, I guess, the Z that's in Christiansted Harbor. So we're here to listen to what the VI Port Authority has to say about their problems, and we're here we understand what their focus is in regards to the economic development that that is expected from this redevelopment of the evaluation of the Christiansted Harbor. And we're also here tonight to hear from you, to hear your inputs, to get your feedback. So we appreciate you all coming out tonight, so thank you. What I want to do is I want to introduce my team here just so you get an understanding of who's here with you tonight, and then later on after I sit down, our planning technical lead will take you through a presentation. We want to share with you what is the process that the Corps goes through as part of its feasibility study. We want to explain to you what are the various phases, how we make milestones along the way, and what overall is our process and how you are involved in that process. So first of all is Ms. Meredith Moreno. She is our Deputy Chief within our Planning Division. We have Ms. Katie Lebo. She is our Environmental Lead. She handles anything related to the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, as you may know that term. We have Ms. Katie Bailey. Ms. Katie Bailey is our Planning Technical Lead. She is the one that's, for the most part, in charge of getting us from A to Z through the process. She'll be sharing the presentation that she's prepared shortly with you in just a few moments. Mr. Will Riley. Will is our Engineering Technical Lead. So he's been working with VEPA and the various parties, the pilots, so as to understand what are the problems with the federal project as is. What can we do to improve it? What can we do to evaluate what is the future design vessel that we're looking forward to in the future? So that's his role as the environmental lead. We have Mr. excuse me, Todd Nettles. Todd Nettles is a senior economist. He's actually out of our Mobile district, and he's with our Deep Draft Navigation Center. So just a quick blurb, there are various centers of expertise within the Corps of Engineers, and Todd is with that group out of Mobile. Miss Alicia Gates is our economist. She's actually works with Todd, and she's out of the Mobile district, again, with our Deep Draft Navigation. So again, when we're doing a navigation improvement study, obviously we don't have the Coastal Center of Expertise. We have the Navigation Center of Expertise with us here to give us guidance and to help us along the way. So we thank the economists for joining us. And lastly, we have Del. Del Cabiche is an economist as well within the Jacksonville District. His specific title is the Environmental Justice Coordinator. So he'll look at the social aspects of the study in regards to how it interacts and affects those communities in the surrounding area of the project. So with that being said, I have no other opening remarks, and I will turn it over to Ms. Katie to give you an understanding on the better pathway and process of our feasibility study. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Again, hi, I'm Katie Bailey. I am the Planning Technical Lead. I do have a presentation for you. I'm just going to kind of go over what the core process is, where we are in the core process, and what we have so far for information for this study. So for today, we're going to discuss all of that. And also, as Chris said, we want to hear from you. So I'll touch on this again, but on your seats, you have two little pieces of paper. One is called a comment card. The other is just a little business card sized piece of paper that has our contact information on it for this study specifically. So if you have anything that you can think of that you want to tell us, you're welcome to fill out that comment card and either give it to one of us or leave it on your seat and we'll collect it. Or if you don't want to fill that out, or if you don't want to stand up and say anything, or if you just think of something later, take that little business card with you and you can send us an email. And it also has our website that we will try to keep up to date on the study as the study progresses. And we will also post this presentation on our website, which is also on that little comment card. We also, if you don't have a pen, we do have a collection of pens, so when the presentation is done, if you do want to fill out the comment card, we have plenty of pens for you to borrow. All right, so we have a lot of text on the screen right here, but this is just a brief overview of the very beginnings of the feasibility study and the very end. So what's going to happen before what we're doing, what has already happened, and what's going to happen after. So core feasibility studies is a formal 3-year process. So at a minimum, they're 3 years. Sometimes they're longer. Those are kind of special cases. And they're used to identify water resource problems. We use it to formulate and evaluate solutions to those problems and determine federal interest in, not just federal interest in do we want to study it, but do we want to move forward with construction. It starts through a formal letter to the district commander, which is the Jacksonville District Commander, Colonel Booth, and a study authority is provided by Congress, which I'll have the study authority on the screen on the next slide. These studies are cost shared with the non-federal sponsor, and we also, at the very end of this study, this will conclude with the signing of what is called a chief's report. So we compile all of these different documents and we have our colonel sign the chief's report. It gets sent to the Assistant Secretary of the Army and the Office of Management and Budget, and then it goes to Congress for official authorization into a Water Resources Development Act bill, or WRDA. You'll find we love our acronyms here, so I will try to spell them all out, but habits are hard to break, so if you need me to clarify anything, please let me know. So that's kind of broad overview. I'm going to get a little bit more detailed into our specific process in a couple slides, but so for this study specifically, the Army Corps' navigation mission is to provide safe, reliable, efficient, effective, and environmentally sustainable waterborne transportation systems stemming from the Commerce Clause of the United States Constitution. So we're looking, that is the mission for this study as well. For this study, we signed a feasibility cost share agreement with the Virgin Islands Port Authority on Halloween of this past year. That kicked off this study. Our non-federal sponsor, our partner in this, is the Virgin Islands Port Authority. And I have our study authority up here on the screen. You can actually find this online, but it is Section 355A.3 of the Water Resources Development Act of 2020. It's also known as Public Law 116-260. So there's a lot of words up here, but basically this is just saying that us, the Army Corps, it gives us permission to study the Christiansted Harbor area for navigation improvements. So it's not specifically, as Chris said, for the Schooner Channel, but it is for the harbor as a whole. So this is just some background on the harbor and the federal government's involvement in the harbor. So all the way back in the 1950s, that is when we got an initial authorized project or study for Christiansted. This came up with an initial project of a 25-foot deep channel on the east side of Round Reef, which is essentially where the Schooner Channel is today. It was never constructed in the 50s, and then later in the 50s, we restudied it and found that there was not economic justification for that specific design orientation of the project. There was another economic restudy done in the 60s that moved the channel to the west of Round Reef. Not quite the channel that we know today, but it did move it over, and it also lessened the depth to 16 feet. In 1962, we had another report that kind of tweaked the design to give us the channel that we know today with those two 90-degree turns, and it follows the natural channel that is already out there. In 1986, that is when we officially deauthorized what was initially brought up in the 1950s. So even though we did study the Schooner Channel, the area in the Schooner Channel, we cannot dredge in there without another authority, without another project getting authorized, because it was deauthorized in 1986. So that is the end of the federal actions that have been taken in Christiansted Harbor, was in 1986. There have been some efforts done by the Port Authority for the Schooner Channel. So we have in 1991, there was a dredging of the Schooner Channel that was not fully dredged. And then again in 2014, there was another effort to receive permits to fully dredge the Schooner Channel, but was not also was not obtained. So just before we move on, just to kind of show, so this black dotted line here, this is what was initially authorized in the 1950s, with a turning basin here, kind of right outside of Altona Lagoon. And then this red is what is federally authorized as the federal study, or the federal channel. Next slide, please. All right, so what are we doing with this study? This is an overview of the timeline of our study. Like I said before, it takes about 3 years. And as you can see, we are at the very beginning of this. We are about 75, 80 days in. And once we hit 90 days, we'll hit that first one, which is our first of 5 milestones that we have within our core process. So in this first phase, it's called scoping. It is where we do all of the heavy lifting with all of our information gathering, where we look at evidence, we look at all of the problems that we are seeing, we look at constraints, And we also gather information from you all, from all of our partners, from the public, from the people who are in the community itself. After this, we will go into our alternative formulation and analysis. So that's where we'll start looking at potential solutions to the problems that have been identified in this first phase. Then we will go into our second milestone, which is our tentatively selected plan milestone. That is where we will have gone through and evaluated all of these alternatives, all of these possible solutions, and we will come up with one that we think is the best. It is the most economically justified. It provides it maximizes our benefits that can be accrued through that alternative. And we go through multiple levels of coordination and review up our chain. And so we present our plan at the tentatively selected plan milestone, and we get the go, no-go from them on if we pursue that as our actual plan, which is what leads into number 3, our agency decision milestone. That is where we get the absolutely yes, this is your project, this is what we want you to go through. Then we go through and we write a report, we release that report, and then it goes into number 5, that chief's report, that final thing that I mentioned on a couple slides earlier, that is what ends the study process of this whole process. So within that, we have what is called the 6-step planning process. So this is how we actually complete that 3-year study timeline. So it's 6 steps. So step 1 is in that scoping period. That's what we're in right now. So that is identify problems, opportunities, objectives, and constraints. We're also working on step 2, which we are inventorying our existing conditions, and we're looking at compiling our future without project condition. So if there is no federal study, if we do not change anything here, what will it look like over the next 50 years? And that will be our baseline for comparison as we evaluate our alternatives. And then we have step 3, we formulate those alternative plans. We come up with all of those solutions to fix those problems. We evaluate them. We compare them to each other and to the future without project condition, and then we select that plan. So we have the 6 steps listed, kind of bullet pointed there, but they're also listed in this kind of flow chart over here. But throughout this whole thing, you're seeing we are gathering information constantly. So as we get new information, we go in, we tweak whatever we've done so that we can provide the best possible outcome for everyone. So I mentioned solutions, I've mentioned alternatives. What are those? So they are, could include, but I cannot stress this enough, are not limited to management measures that I have listed here. So in this first 90 days or so, our team has been going through the process, a rapid iteration of it from start to finish. What would this possibly look like? So we have come up with problems, we have done a little bit of forecasting the future, and we have developed some alternatives. So we've come up with management measures that are structural, so things such as deepening and widening of the channel, but also some non-structural, maybe adding some traffic management, maybe doing additional tugs, things like that. But again, this is not a fully comprehensive list. There are still things that could be added, and there are things that, we might need to take away as we get more information. So this leads into our evaluation of these alternatives. So one of the big things is our National Economic Development Plan. So this is the plan that reasonably maximizes net benefits to the nation from cost savings. So I'll just kind of go through what's on the right-hand side of the screen. So our primary benefits, what we're looking at is transportation cost savings. So what that is the estimated cost or transportation cost without a project, minus the estimated transportation cost with a project. That gives us our benefits. We then take those benefits and we subtract out what would it cost for us to implement this plan. And that gives us our net benefits. We want to have net benefits that are greater than 0. We want to have positive net benefits. That then goes into our benefit to cost ratio. So for every dollar that we spend, that we put into a project, we want to see at least $1 in cost savings or in benefits of some way. And we want that benefit to cost ratio to be a 1.0 or greater. Yes. Yeah, so we look out 50 years. So it kind of goes back to the future without project condition as well. We look out 50 years. Yes, so same with the benefits, future with project. We also look out 50 years and we compare the two. Yes. All right, and also wanted to point out on here that our projects are not intended to provide individual ports an economic advantage over another port. So, yeah, okay, next. All right, so we have a couple of considerations that we have in our process. So for engineering, one thing that we need to determine is a design vessel. So those are vessels that maybe are currently calling into the port or vessels that could call. So some examples are the Sea Dream yacht, something that could be calling into Christiansted, or the Epic Curacao, which it's going through the WAPA, but it is using part of the federal channel. So those are examples. We're not saying that these are our design vessels, but they are possibilities. It's typically the design vessel is the largest ship of a major commodity that movers expected to use the project improvements on a frequent and continuing basis. Our federal projects typically consist of general navigation features, so one of those would be the navigation channel, but that also can include jetties, turning basins, dredge material management areas, things like that. So on the screen you'll notice, so we have Christiansted here. You're familiar with this harbor. Down here are some examples of other management features, or general navigation features that could be implemented into Christiansted. So things like jetties, or a DMMA, a dredge material management areas, things like that. Next. So how do we do that? How do we possibly look at all of these channel improvements? So there are a couple of different things that we have to go through. We have to look at surveys or conduct surveys to see all of the bottom of the channel, see what material is there, presence of rock, anything like that. We have to figure out the volume that is to be excavated. We have to conduct those surveys. We have to look at the future maintenance of whatever alternative it is that we are looking to do. So if we are having to dredge, how often are we looking to have to dredge? Things like that. Next. If we do conduct things like dredging, there's some other design considerations. So we have to look at what type of dredge, if it's mechanical or if it's hydraulic. Those have different considerations as well. And then other things such as presence of sensitive environmental resources. There are a lot of corals and seagrasses that you guys have in Christiansted, a lot of environmental resources. If there are any aids to navigation, we have to take those into account. That's not something that we take over or are in charge of, but we do take that into account. If it calls for it, we do some modeling called ship simulation, that basically we would pull a pilot to our ship simulation and have them do like a model run through what are one of our alternatives channels. We also conduct things such as salinity modeling analysis. We have to take into account sea level rise and whatever existing utilities you have in the port. All right, so another thing that we do in this process is we undergo the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, or NEPA, as we like to call it. So it is a federal law. It requires federal agencies to analyze the effects of various alternatives, including the no action alternatives, so if we were not to do any project, on the human environment. So we coordinate with a bunch of different federal agencies, as well as appropriate state agencies and the public. We include in coordination under other environmental laws, and we solicit and consider public views, on the plans. So we have two instances where we solicit those public opinions. One is right now during our scoping, or during this meeting, during our scoping period. Then we also will release our draft report after our tentatively selected plan milestone, and that is another place for you guys to give us input. We'll typically hold maybe another public meeting. We'll have the email, the website, ways for you guys to give us your input on what we have provided you as an alternative plan. So the NEPA is considered, and it's kind of an umbrella to help facilitate coordination by integrating compliance requirements that may otherwise proceed independently. So basically it covers a lot of these federal, state, local environmental laws, policies, and regulations. So things such as the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, Coastal Zone Management Act, Endangered Species Act, basically everything that's here listed on the screen. So it's kind of a way for us to encompass all of that. So some things that are included in that, considerations, we have all listed on the screen. So air quality, contaminants, environmental justice, threatened and endangered species, recreation, water quality, all of that is considered in our NEPA analysis. All right, so in kind of jumping back to our alternative analysis and formulation. So after we do all of that, all of our engineering analysis, our economic analysis, our environmental analysis, we look at 4 different benefit accounts. So we look at our National Economic Development Plan. So that is changes in the economic value of the national output of goods and services. We look at environmental quality. So those are non-monetary benefits based on effects both positive and negative for cultural resources, aesthetic resources, and ecosystem restoration. We look at what we call other social effects. So that will be effects on social aspects such as community impacts, health and safety, displacement, energy conservation, the list goes on. A lot of different things. And then we also have a regional economic development. So changes in the distribution of regional economic activities such as job creation. So we look at all of those and we're looking at how each plan impacts each of those. So like I mentioned earlier, we are looking for our National Economic Development Plan. So we are looking at the plan that maximizes that very first benefit account, but we are looking at all 4 benefit accounts as well. We also want to identify which plan maximizes all of them. And we move forward from there. Okay. So again, we do want your guys' input. You have the comment cards on your seat. We will be up here. We will be answering questions as you have them. I will not be answering all of your questions. That's why we have the full team, all of their knowledge. We also have 2 posters that I think some of you may have seen that kind of gives a summary of what I've just presented. And we will be around to answer questions as well with the posters. So, and again, if you guys need pens to write your comment cards, we have them up here. We have extra comment cards as well as extra little business cards as well. So I think we're ready for questions. Okay. Yes.
Can you tell us why in 1986 this thing was deauthorized?
Do you mind repeating that?
Drawing a blank.
On the mic?
So that project, the Christiansted Harbor project, was part of a list of projects that was listed in the Water Resources Development Act of 1986. It was more or less a way in which to kind of clean the books. There was a number of projects. If you were to actually go dig up Water Resources Development Act of 1986, you'll see a list of projects. And Christiansted Harbor's authorized project from 1950 was listed as one of those projects that, in this case, was cleaned up and removed from the list of authorized projects.
For a specific reason?
Because it was never constructed. So that's the main reason listed in the WRDA 86 is that because it was never constructed, it was deauthorized. And we're specifically talking about what was that 2,500-foot channel from the Caribbean Sea that terminated in what looks like a cul-de-sac there along the east side of Round Reef.
And then in 1991, you said there was dredging, but it was not fully dredged. Is there a reason why it wasn't fully dredged?
So the 1991 dredge was not the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. That 1991 effort was an effort of the VI Port Authority.
And to further supplement on that, the dredging that was occurring in 1991 was ceased because of the significant rock buildup that was there, that the cutter heads that they were utilizing were damaged and destroyed. And it was determined to not be feasible to continue the project at that time.
So at this time, why would you want to move forward if at that point you determined it wasn't feasible?
The hope is by broadening the scope and scale of the navigational improvements that it'll encapsulate all of the possible benefits to Christiansted, including the potential of federalizing WAPA Channel.
And I'm fully in support of this whole thing. Just what technological changes have advanced that now you can dredge it where the rock bed or whatever is now dredgeable?
We believe that there's the possibility with those technological advances in both mechanical systems and the hydraulics that the dredging would be possible.
And that will be determined, we're 3 months into a 3-year process, and that will be determined after this 3-year process.
That's correct.
Just a quick announcement. We do have a mic for questions. So if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand.
Mo.
The activity in Gallows Bay Harbor, Schooner Bay Harbor, continued in the 80s and 90s, even though there were issues with both dredgings. So why was that possible if it wasn't correct?
The activities, are you referring to vessels continuing
the
to call?
cruise ships that came into Gallows Bay
Yeah.
during the 80s and 90s.
So they had the possibility of using Schooner Channel because of its depths, but over the course of time since the 90s when the Sea Dream was calling onto Christiansted Harbor, there's been additional sedimentation buildup that's reduced the depths and reduced the underkeel clearance on the vessels. That made it no longer safe for them to utilize Schooner Channel.
Okay.
Say you do dredge, how often are you gonna have to come back to dredge again? Because we've kind of experienced. Oh, I think he heard me. Is this gonna be a repetitive process where every 3 or 4 years you've gotta clear that channel? Are there gonna be, seawalls established or anything so that it can't refill? I'm just curious to see, is this going to be like every 3 years there are people dredging?
Yeah, so one of the considerations that we look at in whatever the future of the federal project would look like, if it does include an alteration to be where Schooner Channel is now, we would look at a couple of things. One thing, we would look at the viability of how to dredge it, whether we need to do it with, better cutter head technology or potentially even blasting if it had to come to that. But we will be looking at that. To your question, sir, we would also be looking at the shoaling rates. And we would see how much shoaling goes into there and what the amount of dredging that we would have to do to maintain it. And that all goes into the cost of the project. So when we look out at that 50 years, we look at the amount of benefits that you're going to get in those 50 years, but we also look at the cost that it's going to be. The cost to initially construct it down to the elevations that it needs to be, and the cost to maintain it over those 50 years. So those will be compared to each other, and if it were a situation where to be able to maintain it you had to dredge it quite a bit, well then that would go on the ledger of cost, and eventually if it's too much to maintain, then it wouldn't be worth it, and that's where the whole benefit-cost ratio comes in. Sure.
Is this going to be a strictly federal project, or is there going to be subcontracted work? Like, in other ways, is this going to basically become an issue of where, well, we've only gotten this far, but the other part that was supposed to be done by this wasn't done, and now we have to wait for that? You follow what I mean? Is this strictly federal, the Army Corps of Engineers, or is this
So yes, this
a
is
myriad of contractors?
This is just our project where the federal project would become something, either deeper and wider what's there or alteration of how it looks. The way that we do our work is we do all of our design in-house. We put together a set of plans and specifications, and then we put that out for bid for construction companies to do, so like a dredging company. And then we'll continue to survey it, the Corps of Engineers will, over the years. We'll look at the amount of shoaling that would be occurring, and then again, we would put together a set of plans and specifications and put it out for bid for a dredging contractor to bid on as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not sure I have the correct group of people to
or constructed. Is there a reason why that cannot be moved sooner rather than later, since that work was already done over there?
We're in the process of readying the buildings for the tenant move-in, so we are expecting that to happen within the next couple of months.
Great.
Is the dredging that you're speaking of necessary in order to have the inter-island ferries? Or is it just something that would be necessary for the use of cruise ships?
So I spoke at length with the pilots this morning. The ferry service is not restricted by what's currently out there. The ferry does not have a very big draft, like not into the water as much as some of these other larger ships. So there's no need to improve the channel for the ferry. The problems that we're understanding through our trip here is primarily with these boutique-sized cruise ships, ones of 100 meters or more in length.
But when you reference ferry, I'm speaking of the large ferries, not what we have presently.
So I do not know of any larger ferries that are calling on the area.
I'm talking about ferries, like say, for instance, the size of what runs between St. Thomas and St. John.
The Virgin Islands Port Authority will share that information with the Army Corps so that it can be incorporated into the information that they're assessing. But that is not something to date that's been assessed.
Still be something that, as he said before, would not necessarily require dredging?
We'll need to assess that as a part of this study, and we'll ensure that that's incorporated into the alternatives that are being looked at as a part of this process.
Anyways, question is, the dredging material, once it's removed from the sea, where exactly would you be dumping the material?
So on all dredging projects that the Virgin Islands Port Authority is involved in, we first look for beneficial reuse of that material. And if the material is deemed to not be suitable for beneficial reuse, then that's something that needs to be assessed. Typically, we utilize a caliche pit on the north side of the Henry Rollison Airport on Virgin Islands Port Authority property as a dredge spoil disposal site. But we've also been in discussion with other local and federal agencies about the potential of an offshore disposal site. That's something that's a much longer term process, and it will need to go through a very similar process to what we're undertaking with the navigational improvements project.
Hello. I live real close to the channels, and I overlook it. How long duration of time will it take you to finish your work, get it into a bid package, and out to contractors?
Right. So the various phases that are within the actual feasibility study, there are additional phases. So there is the feasibility phase that we are in right now, probably take about 3 to 4 years. Once we complete that chief's report then goes to Congress. Congress then has to authorize the project in regards to its new improvement. So in this case, while there is an existing federally authorized project right now, any improvements that we make, if we were to actually justify moving or adding to the federally authorized project, then Congress would give us that approval. Once Congress gives the approval and that project becomes authorized, either an addition to or something new and exciting, then we have to wait for Congress to give us an appropriation for design, which we call Pre-Construction Engineering and Design, PED. And so that process is another couple of years. This is not an overnight process. So once the design actually occurs in PED, the third phase is where you asked when will we award it. The contract, the plans and specifications are prepared in the PED phase, and then we wait for a construction appropriation in order to actually award the contract that was solicited based on those plans and specifications. There's no exact time to this. It's real high risk. I'd hate to tell you that we're going to build you a project in 5 to 10 years, but it'll be at least that time or more. Because again, we have no less than 3 to 4 years right now in the current feasibility phase that we're in. And then we have to, again, the Corps does not lobby on behalf of the community or the non-federal sponsor. Our job is to evaluate, design, and then execute upon receipt of the appropriations to do so.
So we're basically talking about 30 years?
Let's
It
hope,
only took the
No, I
bypass
understand.
1
Yeah,
years.
let's hope we're not talking 30 years, but I'm not going to stand up here and tell you it's going to be built in 5.
Or 10. Or 15.
Well,
All
I'll pass
right.
that to the VI Port Authority, but.
Well, I understand that. One other
Yeah.
question. So if this all becomes relevant, is it under the Port Authority's guidelines, or is it going to be a federal project?
No, it will be a federal project. So, so anything in the future would require that entity to, basically come before the government if they're going to potentially want to do anything that would impact, interfere, impede what is the current project. Now, that's the same thing right now. If you were to do anything right now in what is our current federally authorized project, you still would have to go through those exact same processes. All we're doing at this point is trying to see if we can create something that is the problem we understand. The large, I shouldn't say large, but the smaller boutique cruise ships that we're looking to come in and generate the economic development within Christiansted Harbor, we understand that they will not call upon our current federal project. And just for everybody's awareness, the federal authorized project, what you have right now was last designed in 1962. So the design vessel in 1962 was a schooner that that fully loaded of cargo only drafted 11 feet, and a motor vessel that only drafted 13. So the project that's out there that we built in 62 to 1963 was based on 1961 data that went into the economic study. So we understand that times have changed. We understand that the world has changed. And so now VI Port Authority has come to us with a problem. The Corps is here to try to figure out, can we use our existing federal authorized project, smooth it, bend it, to see if we can get in what would be a future
Under a
design.
grandfather clause per se?
So, yes, sir, in a way.
Okay.
Yeah, under a
Okay.
grandfather clause. Now,
Okay.
we may not be able to. That's just
Okay.
the nuts and bolts. At the end
Gotcha.
of the day, that's why I said in my opening remarks is, we're not here to dredge the schooner channel. Our job is to evaluate the problem that's been presented by the VI Port Authority and to see how we can, in the best interest of the nation, as well as the best interest of the Virgin Islands and the territory, to see if we can have more benefits than we do have costs as it relates to what we may or may not have to impact or work around in order to have a successful project, be it still in the footprint of the Z, or maybe it's amended to have an additional option. Again, there are some federal projects that have one entrance channel and they split. Miami Harbor is a good example. It has one entrance channel, but the north side goes to the cruise ship side, the south side goes to the cargo side. We're not talking cargo here in Christiansted Harbor, we're just talking about the future of cruise ships. So it's not to say that there can't be an amendment to the Christiansted Harbor itself, but it may mean that we do change the location, we do change the footprint, but that has to be studied and evaluated.
Okay, since the gentleman with the Port Authority's here, I'd like to ask him a question. Since we have a brand new road down there in Gallows Bay that we waited about 25 years for, when are you going to remove the industrial traffic that comes in through Gallows Bay? Listen to me. I watch it all going in and out. okay? What I'm saying is that it's just a time, it's a matter of time before we have a catastrophic problem down there, and then everybody's going to say, oh, it's not our problem, or they'll walk away, just like they did in Puerto Rico when all those tanks caught fire. The company came in there, filed bankruptcy, and got the hell out of Dodge. So everybody who's down there, including the people who own property, own condos, everyone in that general area knows how dangerous this has become. You have gasoline right beside propane. You have people going in and out of there like, you know, they have no concept of, there's no kind of response mechanism down in that facility. And we've already had a number of spills that luckily enough people, out of the goodness of their hearts, some here, that did it ourselves. But when is someone going to stand up and say, hey, look, we got to move this traffic out of here? And I mean, I understand it's going to cost the shipping companies a few more bucks to come around and end up over by Hess. But this is becoming a dangerous situation between the traffic and as well as the inherent danger of having all of this stuff moving around in the middle of the night sometimes is literally ludicrous, okay?
So the cargo traffic is going to be relocated to the Gordon Finch Molasses Pier on the South Shore. That's going to be happening in the next couple of months. We're working with the tenants for the build out of their leasehold areas in the new warehouse, and that'll be happening, and we'll be sure to put out public notice when that does.
So you're saying in the next 6 months?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to hold you to it.
That's fine. We've been working to complete the warehouse projects on the South Shore, both at the Wilfred Bomba Ella Container Port as well as the Gordon A. Finch Molasses Pier. Those two warehouses have been substantially complete, and we're working through the final closeout items related to both of those facilities. Once those are ready for occupancy of our tenants, they'll be shifting from Gallows Bay to the South Shore.
Thank you very much.
I'll commit to the next 6 months. We're working through some issues, but that's our intent, is we're planning to move all of those within the next 6 months.
Hi, we do have a question on Zoom. The question was asked, my question concerns the public information for the project. Is there a site where the project information is located for the members of the public to access? And I suggest the inclusion of community groups in the planning process. We did provide that information via Zoom, but we wanted to make sure that the public is aware.
Okay, yes, thank you. So we do have a website. I believe it is on the page right now. So if you are on Zoom, you should be able to copy it down. And if you're in the room, you do have those comment cards as well. And we have, we did release, in our NEPA process, our NEPA scoping, we did release a letter for requesting public comment, and we did include as many community groups in that as we knew.
Okay, thank you. We did provide the link in the Zoom chat.
Perfect.
For those attending, because we do have a couple of people online. And we will also have a recording of tonight's meeting on the Virgin Islands Port Authority's YouTube channel. So you can go and watch it later and share with as many people as you like.
Good evening. I have a question. As a resident homeowner, born, bred, and raised in the Gallows Bay area, my question is, I understand it's been a long time project, many generations, and you go back and you show what was approved and what wasn't approved. The question I have is that we're talking about the dredging, we're talking about feasibility studies, figuring out what needs to be done as what you're doing in this process. That process and what occurs in that process, let's for example, if there's blasting that's necessary. My question goes to the fact of what communication, how has that, which part of this process is the impact on the property owners and the homeowners in the Gallows Bay area, in the direct area, throughout the area? Where is that considered in this process?
Hi.
Hi.
So, that is part of the NEPA process. So during the NEPA process, we'll look at everything. So when we talk about the human environment, that means the literal humans, so homeowners like yourself that live in the area and could be impacted by any project that we do, as well as the natural environment, the natural resources, recreation, aesthetics, tourism, viewshed, socioeconomics, demographics. All of those things are part of the NEPA analysis. So that all gets considered in that part of the study process.
So in the NEPA process, as I see that you outlined, you have how would be homeowners be communicated to so that they can participate in that process. For example, I received notification as a business owner through an email. I subsequently shared that with individuals that I knew. But I can tell you there's a lot of homeowners and property owners in the Gallows Bay area who are not in this meeting tonight. They're not aware. So as we go forward, we can talk about the Zoom, we can talk about how we communicate, but there's some on-the-ground things that probably need to happen, as they would say, the old-time way, where meetings are had, and how is that filtered in? Because that's a major concern. For example, you know, I lived on the other end of the bypass project. That blasting of that hill resulted in cracks to homes, to walls. So you have a seashore where you have houses that are right on the bay. If that's going to occur, that aftershock is still going to come forward and find the closest land base to settle itself. And so I think that's a major concern. And that, you know, we're also on the end of knowing that this is a long-term project on the development of the channel and bringing in the mega ships into Gallows Bay. And I'm glad for the gentleman, I don't remember your name, that started out with the disclaimer that you're not here to endorse or not endorse a project. You're just here to complete a feasibility study. But it all gets tied in the long-term development of Gallows Bay. And it's a major concern. And I think, you know, you can say the NEPA, but when would that occur in this process as we're looking at a 3-year process of planning?
The NEPA process is kind of ongoing.
Okay.
Like throughout the whole thing. The NEPA is part of our final product.
Okay.
As it is. The public will be involved, so we do our best to reach out to the residents, the business owners, local agencies, newspapers, news outlets, all of those sorts of things. So we do our best and try to work with local agencies, local partners to get the public as informed as possible, and you know, post it in the newspaper, get flyers out, that kind of thing. We do try to do that on the ground work to make sure that the public is as aware as possible about the opportunity for engagement. We want your comments. We want to hear from you. And that's why we're having this meeting as well. It's because we want to hear from you and we want to make sure that everybody feels included and like they're getting the information that they need and are aware of what's going on. We want to be transparent with the public as much as possible.
Okay.
I want to just add a little more info. So on the screen right now, we have the 3-year process. Those 2 teal dots, number 1 and number 2, those are our formal public comment periods. So right now we're in number 1, the first one. This is at minimum how often we are going to communicate with you, come here, and everything. We can hold more meetings. We have other studies that do it. We have workshops. We have things like that. But what would be great tonight, and thank you for bringing it up, is ways that we can improve our communication with you to make sure that we are getting the information to you.
Well, thank you. And I think what I'm hearing in the response is putting a mechanism in place as to individuals and residents in the Gallows Bay area and a point of contact on how they communicate with you in this process. So in the email, we'll definitely send that forward.
Additionally, I'd just like to highlight that a great source of information is always going to be the Virgin Islands Port Authority's website, our social media pages, and we also do advertise in the local newspapers when we are holding these meetings, and we will continue to do so throughout the duration of the project.
One additional thing is that no project is going to get finalized without a draft report being released to the public to show everything that we've done in our formulation. So is that what that second dot is? That second dot is, so we will come up with our tentatively selected plan, and we will complete a report that will be in draft form, and we will let everybody know that this report is out there for everybody to comment on. And then we take all of those comments back. Sometimes that changes the plan. Other times it doesn't. It all gets incorporated, and then the final report comes out there. So there's definitely an opportunity. You know, like she said many times even before that, but I just wanted to make sure everybody knows that no project's going to be finalized without this whole draft report going out as well.
I have a question.
Just 1 second. Ma'am, real quick, just for our team's awareness, you indicated that you got an email forwarded to you, or you got a direct email from the Corps in regards to being a business owner. Could you clarify that?
I received a letter from the Corps, from Jacksonville's Army Corps.
Okay, so you got one of those scoping letters.
Yes,
Great.
I received a letter, an email today as a business owner from another entity encouraging attendance at this meeting.
Okay.
On visitstcroix.com, I think it was.
Wonderful.
So that is how, but the context of that was different as to your presentation as to the nature of this meeting.
All right.
However, to respond, I understand and I appreciate that we use social media, we use the newspaper, we use other media sources of getting the information out, but we also have to remember that some of the individuals that reside in that area don't access that information in that manner. And so I think it behooves, if we're truly a team, as I said before, us saying, okay, this is our point of contact of how we can organize and work collaboratively on the process.
And we thank you for that input. And those comment cards, if you can add that information in regards to helping us with how to maybe make better communication, those comment cards are there for our
Because I can tell you, I contacted a number of individuals today who had no idea. Some of them are here, but they had no idea of this meeting.
If I may, please. Yes. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. I'm Alicia Barnes. I have a question regarding the public notice and wondering if you're in alignment with what happens with the CZM process, where there's a requirement to notify adjacent property owners. And that would, in fact, address some of the notification concerns that are being discussed here. As part of the local permitting process, the applicant has to provide a list of adjacent property owners. And then once the application is deemed complete, the agency prepares the notifications, and then the applicant would have to mail notifications out to all adjacent property owners, as well as provide proof of notification in a publication of mass circulation. So do you have a similar notification process with the NEPA under the Corps as aligned with our local CZM?
So the CZMA process is further down the line from where we are, since right now we're just right at the beginning of our study process, so that's further down. However, NEPA does have a similar requirement that we engage with the public. And I just wanted to also say, for any community leaders or anyone that's online in the room, please send us an email with your contact information so that we can reach out to you and you can spread the word for us. We do the best we can, but obviously I don't have all of your emails, so it's a little hard for me to send you an email. But I want to share with you as much as possible. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the point that I'm trying to make is that I understand that the CZM, full disclaimer, I'm a former DPNR commissioner, so I understand the process. I am just strongly recommending, in light of the fact that this is a small community and most project would have mass impact, that the notification process that's aligned with rezoning as well as major CZM permit applications, where you get a list from cadastral of adjacent property owners, that is very effective, and you actually reach the target audience that would need the information, because to Ms. Flood's point, a lot of our residents may not have access to email and the various platforms that's commonly utilized for communication.
Yes, ma'am, and we'll be in contact with DPNR quite a lot throughout the process. We met with them earlier today. So we'll be working with them for that communication as well to make sure that we are getting the word out as best we can. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening. Back in 2014, there was a concern about the SS United States being scrapped. And we wrote a letter to DPNR to find out exactly what conditions will have to exist in order for the SS United States to be refurbished and utilize the Virgin Islands as a port of entry. What we want to find out is, since the depth required might be about 32 feet, the channel that you're dredging, would that be able to accommodate a ship like the SS United States? We spoke to Port Authority and they said that it could have gone to an Abramson's port on the south side. So I wanted to find out whether or not you're aware of the conditions of the SS United States, whether you'd recommend any facility that could accommodate it, and whether it might be economically feasible or profitable for that. Thank you.
I can speak to it briefly and then you can. So I'm not aware of that ship or anything really about it, but if you're saying that it drafts about 30 feet, I would say that it is likely whatever improvements we do, it will not be able to accommodate that. The current infrastructure and even planned infrastructure within Gallows Bay are for ships that would likely only to be drafting 18 to 20 to maybe 21 feet. So we're likely headed towards a channel that could accommodate that and not 30 to 30 plus feet.
And from the Port Authority side, this is the first that I've heard. I'm sure there are others in our organization, and I'll be sure to check in with them so that by the time we have the next public engagement, we might be able to give you some more information.
Are there any additional questions?
Good evening. First, I would like to identify myself as to who I am. My name is Hans Larson. I was born and raised in Gallows Bay. I was born there in 1947. And I'm hearing a lot here, but there's a lot missing. Could you go back to the Christiansted Harbor drawing, please? Do you have any objection if I come up front?
No,
No
please.
objection. Thank you. Okay, what I'm looking at here, we all got targeted with letters. The whole Gallows Bay community, the community I live in, we all got targeted with letters. it never mentioned anything about this channel here. It mentioned the schooner channel. Why? There are two channels that comes into Christiansted Harbor. This one named the Schooner Channel, not the Schooner Bay. The Schooner Bay is the name of a supermarket, not the channel. So get this record straight. It's not Schooner Bay, it's Schooner Channel. That's this one here, between Wrong Reef and Fort Louise Augusta. This one here now is called a steamer channel. This is where the steamers, and back in the days, even before my times, these are where the steamers, the steamship, used to come into Christiansted Harbor. But of course, there was no dock in Gallows Bay. It was the wharf area that they used to dock in. Now, you haven't mentioned how wide you're going to dredge. How deep are you going to dredge? The reason I'm saying this, when they dredge the schooner channel here, they never touch the steamer channel. When they build the dock in Gallows Bay, they dredge the schooner channel. And Wrong Reef, this little reef here, that protects the whole Christiansted Harbor here. The tip of it was ground off with a dredge, with a cutter. And they cut a big chunk of this reef off. What happened now? The northwest come in, bypass the reef, and it eroded the whole shoreline from the fisherman ramp that's there in Altoona Lagoon all the way up to Fort Louise Augusta, because they actually cut the piece of this reef here. That's one reason, if you look, I would gladly take you guys up there, and I'll show you what's happening there. It's going on for years, but everybody turning their back at it. They're not looking what's really happening there. And from the fisherman pier all the way up, the land is eroded. You go up there, you take a look, you will see concrete all along here. The concrete have conduits. That beach was ripped up to put conduits and concrete. And ever since they did that, the whole beach have gone. There's one impact that destroying this area here, and there's two impact here that's also destroying it. There's a bridge right here with the only access to Fort Louise Augusta. There was no bridge, it was all swampland. But it was built up with dredge material. The bridge was to gain access to build the Fort Augusta, which is a French fort. As you notice, the government, they don't give a hell. They just let it depreciate. But this is the only French fort we have here in St. Croix. The other two are Danish fort. You prefer the Danish food in French? I don't know. But I want you to tell right now the public how wide you're going to dredge this. You're very close to Wrong Reef. This is a protector of this harbor here. You're very close to it here. You're farther from Wrong Reef. But I want you to tell us here how long, how wide you're going to dredge this, and at what depth.
The reason that we haven't shared that information at the moment is because that information is the results of this feasibility study, is determining what the actual project is going to be. So the draft to the depth of which it will be dredged, the width of the channel, the configuration of the channel, that's all being assessed as a part of this feasibility study. And at the selected project phase is where that will be certain. And following the execution of the chief's report at the end of the feasibility study process is where that information will be known.
So we'll be back here again.
Yes, yeah. And as we've discussed this evening, this is the first meeting and the first public engagement in the 3-year feasibility study process.
But I need to sit down with you guys and discuss a lot here. I could shed a lot of light on you guys, because things happened here before you guys were even born. I just made 77. All right, and I'm quite sure I'm younger than all of you. I'm sorry, older. Anyway, the main thing here is we got to be careful. Gallows Bay is a swampland. It used to be a swampland. It was filled, and all of us who are on unstable property, they raid. But anything that is going to bring a higher volume of water into the harbor or higher seas, we're going to be the first one to go under. So you have to consider this too. It's a fishing village that's been there for over 250 years. And it's within the historical site. So we don't want no more impact than what we already seen. That's what a grave, grave mistake when they cut Peace Wrong Reef. A very grave mistake. When they dig up the beach to run conduit for the radio station. They destroy everything there. And it's still being there. As far as the material that's taken up, I think all that dredge material should be pumped right here to try and build back the beach. And a suggestion, you have we are called the Black Bridge. It's the only bridge that you could access for Augusta here. If you build a breakwater here to compensate the damage on the reef, that will save the whole property right there. That is my suggestion. I'm not the engineer, but I got common sense.
We appreciate the potential for beneficial reuse and your ideas, and we'll certainly take them under consideration as a part of this process.
But I need to sit down with you guys, really. I hear a lot, and I think I could share a lot.
And I just wanted to say from the NEPA side, I appreciate your comments and the history. It helps us.
Thank you.
And it provides us some background that is a little bit harder for us to find, right? Not a lot of this stuff is written down.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Odette.
Are there any other questions from members of the audience?
Just to Mr. Larson's point, I would really like to stress that as you undertake this feasibility study, I know you have a tendency to reach from a pool of local consultants that you may have dealt with historically or traditionally, but it's important that you engage local members of the community that have a historical knowledge of the traditions and culture and the contours of the natural resources. I think oftentimes we do these studies in a vacuum, not having input from the local grassroots stakeholders. So I would encourage you, as you undertake this, that you engage members of the community that represent the entire community and not just a select segment.
Ms. Barnes, I appreciate your feedback, and I hope that tonight is an example that we're willing to have that type of engagement with the public. We're willing to hear and listen about your thoughts, your feedback, your concerns, in the hope that we can come up with the most equitable solution possible for the territory.
Hi, yeah. Your point exactly is why, I hate my voice. That's why the Jacksonville district hired me to reach out to other people that we're not used to reaching out to. So if you have anybody or any groups that would be beneficial for us to reach out to, feel free to share that information with me.
Are there any other comments or questions, members of the audience? Monifa, anything else from Zoom?
Hi, good evening. question on the younger end. Thank you for that, by the way. I really appreciate that. So from the schooner inlet, I don't know if you guys know, or since this is the first sitting, the waves that come in through there have become progressively bigger and bigger, especially on bad weather days. Also, in the future, I don't know if you guys do know that on Long Reef there's going to be potential coral restoration going on the side of Coral Restoration Foundation. Long Reef is a very volatile ecosystem as of today and moving forward due to stony coral tissue loss. I'm sure you guys may be aware of this to some extent.
Yes.
Okay. In dredging, you guys know a lot will be picked up and recycled and resurfaced. Is there any potential plans, as of current, to mitigate the effects of sedimentation on these reef ecosystems, not just Long Reef, but also Round Reef? Because, again, these are important and they have been regarded as infrastructure. So is there anywhere on your part that you've been thinking about and going along there to deal with that, the potential implications of those?
Yes, thank you. So that is part of the NEPA process. It's the mitigation piece of the puzzle. We work with our federal and local agency partners to come up with mitigation plans if they are required. And that is dependent on what the selected plan ends up being. So we're early in the process for that right now, since we're just looking at all of our options right now. But it is part of the steps. Yes, please.
Yeah, so dredging around any sensitive environmental resources is absolutely a concern for us at the Jacksonville District. It's something that we don't take lightly. So when we do look at all our alternatives, we look at obviously where we would be dredging. Those would be direct impacts that we would have to address, mitigate for. That's the fancy word for it. Where moving corals or replanting corals. But it even goes beyond that. We would be looking at potential sedimentation in the adjacent areas, right? So when you're doing a dredging job, there's some turbidity that comes up and there's possible sedimentation in the adjacent areas. So from the engineering standpoint, what we do is we'll look into potential numerical models that we'll be running that will show, plumes that would potentially be caused by the dredging, where that sediment may be settling, and all of that would come into play as part of our analysis for what all of the impacts of the project would be. If that sedimentation is deemed to potentially cover some coral and destroy it, well then that would also need to be mitigated for, either relocated, replanted, all of that, and that all goes into the cost of the project. So to answer your question more directly, yes, we absolutely do that. We look into it. We're going to probably run some hydrographic modeling to see how far these plumes may go if we do dredge. We'll assess what those impacts are. There will be mitigation and cost associated with it, and it will become part of the cost compared to the benefit of the project.
And just along that line as well, so we work with the experts, right? So we work with National Marine Fisheries, we'll work with DPNR, and like the USVI Stony Coral Tissue Loss Task Force. We'll work with all of those people to make sure that any kind of mitigation that is needed for the reefs is as sustainable and equitable as possible for the project.
And from the Port Authority side, environmental mitigation is something that we're very familiar with. We've implemented it on numerous other dredging projects, including the Molasses Pier, Crown Bay Harbor, and we recently, our governing board actually approved a task order associated with environmental mitigation, the transplantation of, I believe, approximately 300 corals and around 3 acres of seagrass as a part of our pending permit for the Charlotte Amalie Harbor dredging. So it's something that we're very familiar with. We understand the implications and the necessity of mitigating those environmental impacts.
One more note, just on, sorry, the biologist in me is coming out. So the way that we proceed when it comes to mitigation and effects to resources is avoid, minimize, mitigate. So first things first, we do everything we can to avoid impacts. If we can't, then we try to minimize those impacts as much as possible. And then we talk about mitigation. So there is a step through that we work through so that it is as environmentally friendly as we can make it.
The long-term technical term is the least environmentally damaging practicable alternative, also referred to as the LEDPA, for those of you who like acronyms as much as we do. Any other questions or comments from the audience?
This one's a comment. So as a marine biologist myself and a research biologist, my question is actually because as a research scientist, I'm more concerned about the after effects of transplanting these corals. The survivability, that's a questionable aspect of it. Hence my question, and hence me wanting to know how much you guys have thought about it. It's not just transplanting these corals, or rather, coral reefs aren't just corals. They're more of a very eccentric and diverse ecosystem. So it's not just about transplanting coral, it's about their survivability and where these things go after they've been transplanted.
Absolutely, and that's why we work with the experts to make sure that we are considering all of those things, so that we're considering the survivability, how adaptable are those corals, can the reef come back on its own, how much do we need to move, is it best to move them or is it best to leave them, how big are they, how healthy are they, all of those things, how affected by stony coral tissue loss disease are they. All of those pieces come into play when we talk with our agency partners and we come up with our mitigation plans if they're needed.
I'd once again like to thank everybody for your attendance this evening. We greatly appreciate it, and I think I'll speak on behalf of the Corps and again expressing their thanks for everybody coming out. And we'll be sure to keep in touch about the next public engagement steps in this vital process for Christiansted Harbor.
Really quick before everyone leaves, if you did fill out a comment card and you want to give it to us, you can approach any of us, hand it to us, or just leave it on your seat and we'll collect them. Thank you. And we will stick around for to talk if you guys have any other questions.